Hello gamers, this is Sai and welcome back to Which Way Games. Who was the ultimate 80s action star?
What would you wish of me?
Be ever impressive.
And with that being said, let's get on with the video. In the 80s and 90s, games were introduced to gaming icons that over time took their place in gaming history, such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario, Link from the Legend of Zelda, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro the Dragon. All of these had multiple games made over different gaming systems throughout the years, but there's one gaming icon that I feel doesn't get as much recognition as it deserves. This would be the lovable and endearing Rayman, with his floating limbs and his fabulous hair. Rayman was created by Michael Ansel, a games director for Ubisoft. Taking inspiration from Russian, Celtic and Chinese fairy tales, Ansel was able to use these to create the overall design of Rayman, which ended up being simple yet funny. What made Rayman stand out from other gaming icons at the time was the fact he had no neck, arms or even legs.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary. 'Tis but a scratch.
Rayman still had hands and feet, but had the ability of separating them from his body, but more on that later. With a gaming series that has expanded over the years onto many gaming platforms, let's go back to where it all started. In today's video, I'll be looking at Rayman for the PlayStation, and I'll be playing it via the PlayStation Classic. Rayman initially was being developed to appear on the Atari ST back in the 80s. This never came to fruition, and there was even a rumoured version that was going to appear on the then cancelled NES CD console that went on to become the Sony PlayStation. The look of Rayman as gamers know it today actually came from a graphical error while game developers were testing early playthroughs of Rayman. The character sprite of Rayman lost his arms and legs, but what was left was a pair of floating hands and feet. This at first caused an issue for developers, but eventually this error was left in due to the positive feedback from various teams within Ubisoft, as well as early game testers' comments. With this error now being part of the universe of Rayman, developers came up with the idea of Rayman throwing his fists as a way of attacking. Just imagine the bemusement on enemies' faces when a flying fist comes their way. The music of Rayman had three composers working together to create a catchy yet simple soundtrack that would fit within the style of Rayman. With the majority of the game now finished and ready to be released worldwide, Ubisoft had to research different cultures where the game would be released. For example, one thing game developers had to take into consideration was the colour of Rayman himself. While the overall style was fine, his torso had to be changed from purple to blue, especially for releases in Japan. Now the reason for this, in case gamers don't know, is that the colour purple in Japan is associated with death.
Why do things have to be the way they are?
So blue seemed the best choice, especially with a certain blue hedgehog's popularity still taking the world by storm. With all the technical glitches sorted and the design changed for Japanese releases, Ubisoft were ready to publish Rayman, and at the beginning of September in 1995, Rayman was released. And like always, let's go back to the past to see how Rayman was advertised.
Surprised to be named Best Video Game of the Year.
No.
Does it bother you that critics call this game addictive?
No.
Will you tell us what that O stands for?
Nope.
Are you ready to explode on PC CD-ROM?
Yeah!
Available for the Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and now on PC CD-ROM.
The story of Rayman starts in a peaceful valley where the peace is maintained by the Great Protoon. However, one day, the evil Mr. Dark arrives in the valley and decides to kidnap the Great Protoon in a plot to take over the valley. Without the protection of the peace-loving Protoon, the Electoons are vulnerable to Mr. Dark's forces of evil, who then proceed to capture the Electoons and lock them up in cages. Brawlhala the Fairy summons the help of the valley's greatest guardian, Rayman. Rayman must go on the journey to restore the balance of the valley, as well as rescuing the Electoons, as well as the Great Protoon, while being aided by Brawlhala the Fairy, as well as a few other friends. Gameplay for Rayman has gamers controlling the floating limb hero through 6 worlds in total, ranging from the colourful Dream Forest, all the way through the caves of Scops and eventually ending up at Candy Chateau. Now, each of these 6 stages are broken up into sub-stages that once completed allow Rayman to continue on his journey. Also, within each stage there are 6 cages that are holding the Electoons captive. These cages are hidden throughout each stage, all of which must be found as they play an important role later when Rayman faces up against Mr. Dark. Not only can gamers find these cages and free the Electoons inside, gamers will also collect small blue sparks known as tings. I said ting, not tingle. When 100 are collected, then an extra life is rewarded, but if Rayman loses a life, then all the tings collected will be lost. These tings are also used as a payment to the magician that Rayman will encounter throughout the game. The magician will be able to grant Rayman access to a bonus stage where all sorts of rewards lay within. Now, Rayman is a side-scrolling platformer, and this brings a certain charm about it, especially when compared to other side-scrolling platformers of the past. Unlike the platformers of the past, Rayman only has a certain amount of lives that if all are lost, then it's game over. As for defending himself against the evil forces of Mr. Dark, Rayman has the ability to use his fists as a way of attacking. Gamers will see Rayman throw his fists in the direction of the enemy, which is amusing to watch. Eventually this attack is upgraded, which comes in handy when dealing with the end of stage bosses throughout this PlayStation Classic. Throughout the game, Rayman will gain more abilities from the Fairy Patella, such as grabbing flying rings, and another ability that Rayman is well known for. This ability is being able to use his hair like a helicopter and float down or across to places where a normal jump won't suffice. Coming back to the story, now that Rayman has successfully rescued the Electoons, he comes face to face with Mr. Dark while in the land of Candy Chateau. While in battle with Mr. Dark, Rayman loses his ability to punch. With everything all but over, the Electoons luckily restore this ability back to Rayman so he can carry on the fight and defeat Mr. Dark. Defeating Mr. Dark, the evil boss flees, leaving Rayman to deal with hybrid versions of the previous bosses he'd already encountered. Easily defeating these, Rayman goes on to rescue Patella, as well as recovering the Great Platoon and restoring peace to the valley. With everything restored back to how it was, Rayman takes a holiday with his friends, as well as a few former enemies. However, Mr. Dark is still out there, but when will he return for revenge against Rayman? When released, Rayman was highly acclaimed for its style of animated 2D graphics, as well as a catchy soundtrack that fitted perfectly with gameplay. Scoring quite high with critics for his originality, Rayman squashed the rumour of the PlayStation not being able to make a decent side-scrolling platforming game. In fact, Rayman turned out to be one of the best-selling PlayStation games, especially in the UK, with around 5 million copies sold. It was so popular that it even beat Gran Turismo and Tomb Raider in sales. Now, Rayman did end up being released in the Atari Jaguar, the Sega Saturn, as well as MS-DOS operating systems. However, the Jaguar version was a weaker port of the rest due to lower sound quality, especially for the music and slow responsive controls. Rayman was still classed as one of the best Jaguar games, however, but pales in comparison to the PlayStation version as well as the others. Overall, Rayman is a fun platformer to play and certainly pays homage to the platformers that came before, like I mentioned earlier. Its colourful stages, fun gameplay and endearing character design will certainly draw the gamer in while playing. And with a fairly easy learning curve, gamers are in for a treat, especially in the later parts of Rayman. Over the years, Rayman has been released on other gaming systems like I mentioned before, as well as spanning several sequels, which I'll come back to in future videos. Now, luckily Rayman does appear on the PlayStation Classic if gamers are having trouble trying to find a copy of Rayman. Sure, some of the games on the PlayStation Classic are lackluster at best, but with a bit of technical know-how and patience, gamers can add more classics from the PlayStation's library of games, especially Rayman 2. Rayman is definitely one of those games that can be played on a lazy Sunday afternoon and should be in any gamer's collection. Anyway, come back next time when the bounty hunter known as Samus is on the hunt for the space pirate called Ridley, or all these strange mysterious creatures called Metroids that she encounters. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.